and gentlemen, Shiva for you.
Thank you, thank you. Unlike before, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of quickly introduce the entire introduction and sit here, so the spot is on me so I can read this, and run the presentation from here if you guys don't mind, and probably get up again for the questions, right? So that'll work perfect for me. First of all, thanks to Jay, thanks to Ripple, thanks to a whole bunch of people who have actually made this possible, and it's an absolutely brilliant idea. One of my beliefs has always been that design, business, and technology is a triumvirate. You can never separate them. Unfortunately, there is a lot of technology and business gatherings like this that you see. You don't see design and technology and business in one spot. This is a good place to be in, and I think it'll be worthwhile. And we always say that design always comes in from the user/consumer perspective or customer perspective. Technology comes from the feasibility or the performance perspective, and business knows the domain and always comes from the return of investment perspective. So I'm painting this big picture for you guys because I know there's a startup, there's a bunch of founders here, there's a bunch of designers here, and there's a bunch of technologists here, and everybody's got to get a good context before we start about this stuff that I'm trying to talk about here, which is called brand new belief. So this is a talk about brand. There are a few caveats that we need to talk, I need to start with. One, first of all, this is more about strategy than design. If you really think there is a gap between both, according to me, there is none. So this is more about strategy than design, and I think that it's not far from each other. To start with, there's a beautiful quote from Muhammad Ali. I guess I don't need to explain who he is, but it's an absolutely beautiful quote. So it's about correlations, ability to take something and correlate it to something else which is conceptually similar. So he actually takes ability to, he's actually taking water bodies and correlating it to a religion. So the interesting thought here is correlation. Designers love the concept of correlating things and the ability to kind of structure it in such a way that you and I will easily understand the stuff that we are talking about, because sometimes design, or in this case brand, can get so complex that you've got to have a correlated something that grounds it in some way. So I was thinking about what to correlate with. I grew up with a lot of stuff which is to do with movies. Whichever specific generation you are from, movies is one thing that will kind of look. So I was looking at India as a context. One is this. The second is obviously this, cricket. And I'm the last guy to talk about it. I don't like it, And when I grew up, there were only transistors. And when you walk on the street, you can actually see three people here, and you knew there was a wicket because all of them jumped together, completely separately, So you didn't hear the noise and stuff like that. Cricket is not my deal. But the interesting part is there was one which is actually a belief or a faith system, which is religion, which is something, again, that we can talk about and correlate it interestingly to what we have as the larger framework of brand. I'm trying to do that today. Bear with me. We'll talk about it. And if you guys have issues against this, you can throw stones at me, hit me later. But to start with, I think let's go through this as a process. If you guys can kill that light, or is that the spot? Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. So, talking about religion, I think the larger thought of what we are going to visit today is this. Again, there are a few things which I call as the brand Riot Act that I need to read to you, and these are standard stuff. There are so many people who would have said this thing again and again and again, but it's important that I state it too. One, brand is not a logo. Two, the idea of a brand is way beyond what you slap on things. And it's way more deeper than that, and it's an experience. You would have, again, heard this too many times, but I got to say it so that I can get on with business. Right? And the third thing that is an important thing that I need to talk to you about is also the entire idea of brand is internal and external. You've got to think about the stuff as something that is facing your team in startups and something that is facing outside towards your users and customers as a startup too, as a business. So now that we have done with it, let's go to the standard business. So we have kind of worked quite a bit, and me in person have worked quite a bit with the whole different sizes of companies. Right now, the company that I work on works with pretty large conglomerates, trying to get their brands. Do I enjoy it? That's a different question. We'll take it outside. But then it's a pretty large conglomerate, and it's very difficult for them to change. A brand change means a big change. They've got to change ground up to do a lot of stuff, right? You guys, startups, if you're a part of a startup and if you're in a startup, you got an advantage of being agile. You actually can be born into a brand, which is an interesting thing to do. You can start with it. There is no change technically. The change comes much later. So that's one of the reasons that I actually correlate religion in one sense too, because a faith is something that you're born into. You can change it, but you're kind of born into a faith in one sense. So that's an interesting analogy. That's an interesting set of things that we can start with, okay? So the first set of stuff that we're going to talk about as brand as a belief system, which you probably need anyway to kind of do any kind of brand exercise, is the 4 C's. The context, customers, competition, and your own company. This has got nothing to do with religion. If you think it is, it's bad news, but this is not. This is a standard business stuff. You need to know these 4 C's before you kind of move on and put a catalytic idea in the center. Like, for example, you can see it there. What are the key trends in the category right now? Is probably the context. The customer is the spirit of the target and target group. What will you make the brand resonate? How will you make the brand resonate the core values and the competition itself? This is the 4 C's that you need to start the entire exercise with. We are trying to do this stuff tomorrow at a workshop, so if you guys are in the workshop, you'll see it at work. But that's standard for any business that you start. Now let's go to the faith. The concept of faith that we talk about, or the religion that you guys are going to start, really. I think, in my opinion, and in the structure that is given, faith can be broken down into these pieces, right? There is philosophy, ethics, there is an experience, how you experience the religion or the faith that you believe in. There is narratives, legends, myths, stories, somebody killed somebody, the good one, the evil, all that stuff comes in the narratives. There is rituals. There is rituals that you do on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, monthly basis. Then there are objects of worship, and sacred objects that you would not change or move, or those kind of stuff. That's largely the set of things that I'm actually going to talk about for an extremely long time today. You can put your hand up and say it's going too long and I'll stop wherever I am. But that's what we are going to talk about today. First thing that we'll talk about is the concept of philosophy, which is specific to a religion, right? So let me get my bearings a little bit here. Yeah, so philosophy is, there is a guy called Simon Sinek. I'm sure that a lot of guys here would have actually gone through his presentation of the Golden Circle, Simon Sinek's Golden Circle. It's a pretty long presentation, but it's quite interesting. Some parts of it are absolutely beautiful. So he actually has a book that he's written, which is called as Start with the Why. Right? Start with the why, and that's a beautiful thing that he kind of tries to explain in the stuff that if you actually have a why, a how, and a what for your business, you start with the why. And the interesting thing that he quotes there, and the interesting thing that he kind of talks about there as a story, which is something that I'll narrate to you, which I found interesting, is you look at Apple. Oh, by the way, there is no brand presentation without the cursory mention of Apple, and this is that one. Right? So, just making sure that you guys get it. If you actually take Apple, for example, Apple makes computers. Technically, a whole load of people who make computers. I mean, you could think otherwise, but largely they make computers. The why of the Apple, as defined by them, is that they wanted to make people think different. That's what they set themselves as the why. It had nothing to do with what they do. They wanted to make people think different by bridging the gap between people and technology, or access to technology, and that is the how of it, and the what of it is that they made phones and computers. So that's the largest sense of start with the why, and the why is way deeper. It runs way deeper in the spirit of in the company. I mean, I'm a big fanboy, a fading fanboy right now, but you know what I'm saying. That it's deeper. It's way deeper than what it is. Let's look at Dell. Pretty much the same thing. Now, I'm not putting down Dell or putting up Apple or putting down Apple in any other way, but then this definition of why you do what you do and how you do it is so important that if you actually look at Dell, Dell does the same thing. But the Dell's why is because why the hell do you need stuff that, why the hell do you buy stuff that you do not need? You should be actually getting exactly what you need, not what I have. So they, as technology, so they said, ability, how do you do it? You configure your own technology. You configure what is right for you. And what do they sell? They sell computers. So technically, that's what they do. But the, the deep philosophy that runs behind both these companies are kind of different. If you're a startup, and if you're a design team inside a startup, you got to push so hard to kind of get that why, and an abstraction and the easy stuff of why. It's not about, if you're a food company, a food delivery company, it's not about delivering on time. That comes later, It's about stuff like saying that everybody should enjoy things without probably a hurdle in between. It could be as open as that for a food delivery company. Everybody should get gourmet food easily. Probably everybody should have hygienic blah, 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 delivered to them in an easy way and should enjoy it. So it's got to be way deeper than exactly what they are about, right? What they do. So that is the larger thought of what philosophy is. Have I left out anything? Yeah. Yeah, so that is what philosophy is. And we go to the next one, which is ethics. Ethics is like the rules about human behavior. So I keep saying that it's probably like the 10 commandments of your brand. It's actually draws a lot of nice boundaries within the organization and outside to keep people together. It makes it societal. Societies have rules. Societies write down that you can't go kill somebody. No, you can't. That's societal rule that was written ages back. Day before yesterday, we had a societal rule, don't accept 500 rupees. So that's kind of similar. So I think these are rules that bind us in some way. And these are about human behavior and rules. So your brand typically should have these ethics. Like I can give you some examples. Uber, technically, is not supposed to, when the guy calls you, they're not supposed to ask you, where do you want to go? They are not. That is, of course, Bangalore is way beyond all those kind of rules. But they are not supposed to ask. That's a rule. That's a rule, for instance. You can't do that. And they're not supposed to refuse a ride. And like if you go and see them in either Singapore or anywhere else, they cannot refuse a ride. Wherever the stuff is, even if it's going 2 blocks away, they are supposed to take it. That's an ethic. That's a rule that has been defined and the rule by which everybody practices stuff. And that's one example. There could be many. There could be many, many ways in which ethics are defined within a brand system or a belief system itself. The next one that's going to talk about, and I'm going to probably spend the longest amount of time because there is a whole bunch of people who are sitting here because all Jay's friends are also in the same realm, and that's about experience, right? And it's an interesting thing to talk about. When I say experience, let me be clear, I'm not talking about user experience alone. I'm talking about every possible modality that a consumer, a team, an internal person engages with the brand. These are all experiences. So a few things that I want to actually talk about before we kind of move to the stuff is that how do you actually make people feel with your brand? That's the larger thought of what an experience is all about. There could be stuff like this: dread, guilt, awe, mystery, devotion. Apple was all about devotion, right? On one point, there was a belief. And Samsung had a little vengeful devotion till something burst in somebody's pocket. Like that, and that is what the experience is all about. So we are going to talk about probably 4 areas of experiences, like where we say how resilient is your brand. I'll go into details in the next slide, but how resilient is your brand? How impressive is it? These are all experiences, so you've got to kind of think about it as an experience that I'm talking about, not as something, not as just plain words or not as even a piece of code. How responsive and how interactive is your brand? Those are things that you got to talk about. I'm going into detail in the next one if you see. So we have this fancy model that we do like all design companies. We have fancy models that we use to kind of derive stuff in an interesting way, which is called as the experience framework, which is technically owned by Brand Union. But I'm using this to kind of walk you guys through what are these pieces that we are talking about as just plain experience. Now, you can apply this to user experience and still it'll all work. It'll work fantastic. If I actually look at impression, it's about relevance. First thing is about relevance. Relevance is that the context at which that you're working on. How many people really need you as a product or a service? How many people want you, and how often do they want you as a product or a service? How relevant are you in today's world when you're out there? That is what the relevance is all about. The next one is differentiation. I'm not going to talk much. You guys know, if there are a bunch of people in the category, how is your experience making stuff different so that people are coming back to you and not going back to somebody else? The third one is about truthfulness, honesty. Brands that are extremely, it's quite nice to hear brands that are extremely honest. I mean, there are things that I can talk about, Tata and Reliance and all that, I would not. If you actually look at the resilience part of it, let's go to the resilience part of it, right? Responsibility. I mean, I believe that it's a responsibility of every possible designer and every possible new business to feel responsible for the environment that we are a part of. We've got to feel sustainable, something sustainable happens through our businesses. And so, irresponsible businesses are not good anymore. So that is the entire idea of responsibility. Ability to future-proof it. How far can you push your entire functionality, feature, usability, design, that it will be difficult for other people to catch up soon? How can you have that one functionality, one method of differentiating yourself that nobody else can reach so quickly, right? That's the future-proofing. Category influence. What can you do as a small thing that changes the entire way in which people look at category? Uber, again, a fantastic example. People looked at personal transportation in an extremely difficult way. Like going earlier, from an experience perspective, I always feel, considering I'm from Whitefield, I always feel that it's phenomenal freedom. You feel free when you actually have the Uber app in your stuff. You can move about anywhere you want. That is the experience or the feeling that you can have for that. And that is something that they influenced hard as a category. They're a category influencer. Adaptability. You call Indigo, you call any of the airlines and tell them that you're traveling with an elderly person or with a child, and how adaptable are they? How can you tweak your service, your product so smartly, a little bit, that it makes it custom. It makes it feel like it's custom built for me because I had a problem traveling otherwise. That is the adaptability of every possible brand, and that is a part of being responsive as a brand. If I call, I say something, they respond. And that is the ability to adapt themselves. Approachability. This is not the contact us link which is on top of your website. This is surely not that. And it's not the 1-800 number that comes to India for sure. It's not. This is about, or not even that form that you fill, those horrible forms that you got to fill. And no, these are not. This is about ability to make people get what they want very easily, or have a conversation, or continue an engagement beyond a certain point of time. And that's what approachability is all about. Personalization, I spoke about it earlier. How personal can it be? I'm not going to talk about those three. Those three, you guys know what exactly that stuff is. I think there are a lot of people who are sitting in from e-commerce. There are a lot of user experience designers in the group. So if I cannot talk about consistency, and that will be too bad if I talk about consistency, because you guys are all about that. And I cannot talk about access, surely not, especially with the kind of stuff that you're talking about, universal design, and ability to give access to everybody possible without race, religion, and in any possible way, for businesses especially. That access is important, and delivery. I mean, there is no business without good fulfillment, and that we all know that. If there is no good fulfillment and not good delivery, your business is not going anywhere. So given this is the big framework that specifically talks about experience. Now, let me remind you again, I'm still talking about religion and brand together, because we've actually gone over an extremely long process of doing this. Another thing that you will hear constantly is brand narratives. That's Patachitra. You would have seen examples of Patachitras where stories are told by drawing things, and that's probably a beautiful example of saying that how narratives are formed. Narratives are actually painting your context in stories. That's what narratives are all about, right? There are two possible ways you paint your context in stories. One is the entire context and need of your user, your customer, can be painted as a beautiful story. Like, actually telling a story of a situational story of somebody who was stranded somewhere and could get something else so that they can do whatever they had to do is a beautiful story to say. And those narratives are born out of that. And similarly, if you actually see internal stories that are told, startups have got fantastic stories. Like, we started in this guy's garage and we ate 2 bananas for the entire week. And, those kind of stories that started, those are internal stories. Those are actually binding stories that keep people together. I'm sorry I'm saying bad stories, but there are better stories than this for sure. Including the Steve Jobs one, we actually started stuff at a garage. But, those are narratives. You guys live on it and you guys love it. And there are people who've written books and became big because they just gathered these stories in the valley. And Bangalore has got quite a few of them now, in the startup realm. And that's what narratives are all about. And that's an interesting part of every possible brand and brand thinking that you've got to do about your stuff. But the best part is that nowadays, especially nowadays in the digital realm, everybody is talking about content marketing and content being the big thing. This is a beautiful germ to kind of jump off and create content that is like short and small videos or infographics or slideshows and photo stories and so on and so forth. That's what these narratives are all about. And then we go to rituals. Rituals are practices that we do, like there are processes, practices that we do internally time and again. It could be an appraisal method that is internal, that is very, very specific to your company, the method in which you do it. And again, it's a great method in which you can bind your team together. Externally, rituals are stuff that you start searching for. The corner, they take the duvet and fold the corner and leave one chocolate, which is a chocolate mint on top of your pillow in hotels. That's a ritual. If it's not there, you'll call the manager. That's a ritual that happens, and that's a brand ritual that happens. And you can customize it. You can do beautiful things with it. And those are the actual rituals. These are forms and orders of ceremonies in traditional religions, but actually, when it comes to brands themselves, these are about memorable, small incidents that you can leave in the mind of your user or your customer. And that's what rituals are all about. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is objects. They are the simplest. Actually, people think that this is what design is all about. Design is all about, do symbol, paint a picture, color palette, typography, all that. No, it's not. The entire stuff that I talked about is strategic design. It is design. And here we are talking about what signifies your brand as a symbol. What are the few things that you'll collate together as like a color palette, a typography, a method in which you interact, even the stuff like at one point of time, if you said people who bought this also bought, was an Amazon stamp. It cannot be anybody else. It's a product. It's almost like a stamp of those guys. That is an object in one sense. You're actually keeping these mystical, mysterious, small objects all over the place that actually connects the story to the brand that you have. And that is another method to look at it is the object. So given this, I'm going to go back to that stuff that we talked about, right? Like the biggie. We got contact, customers, competition, and company. We spoke about philosophy, ethics, experience, narratives, rituals, and objects. And hopefully, if we do all this stuff, we can answer these fantastic questions. What do we stand for? What is the brand essence of this company or the startup that we've got? What do we believe in? And what are the rallying cries that we got to run behind, right? That's the values. What people do we engage with? And how do we engage? That's the entire talk. How do we engage comes later. What distinguishes us is the entire differentiation piece. What we offer is the experience, and what we say or show is the symbol, tone, and voice that you talk about in communications. That's largely what I wanted to present to you guys today. This is a short and easy exercise, or not really easy, but short exercise that we're going to do as a part of a workshop tomorrow sometime. In the morning. I think it's 11:45-ish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shiva. Thank you for being with us. Do we have any questions? Do we have any questions here? Okay.
Hello. Hi. Thank you. Can you hear me? It's all working, right?
This is this okay? Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. Clear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, thanks again for an awesome presentation.
Pleasure.
There.
Thank you.
I've been sort of fortunate enough to be engaged in projects where I've been sort of engaged from the brand building to a product execution. In some cases, I mean, I was lucky to have internships and job experiences like that. But recently, I've seen both sides of it. I've seen people where they start with that belief that they got to start with the brand first and then translate into a product.
Yeah.
And now I'm in a scenario, you could almost say, where we're still figuring out what is the differentiator. What is your category influencer almost. So in this case, where I came with this mindset that when I started this project with these friends of mine, that we need to define a value system first, what we stand for, and so on and so forth. But sort of, how can I say? I mean, it didn't sort of translate well with them. So we didn't end up doing it initially right now. So how do you think, so how do you see this exercise being planted in what part of the product development process? So when you say brand building,
Anywhere. The reason I'm saying anywhere is because again, that entire idea that entire thing that I talked about, we work with conglomerates that have been in business for like 40, 50 years. It doesn't really matter. You can make them dance at one point in time. I mean, they don't, but you can make them dance. But in your case, agility is very easy. I'm assuming that you guys are probably a 5-10-year-old company. Am I right?
No, 3 months actually.
Beautiful. So I'm saying that now. You do it now, right? I don't think, I don't think you guys have, and why I'm saying this is that's exact reason why I put this stuff together. You're born, like I said earlier, you're born into a faith. If you actually start a belief right now and create the system which is large, most often the stuff that plagues you guys is the direction that you want to take the stuff to. It's not about what you want to do, right? And that's something that needs a certain amount of distilling. If you want to hire somebody from outside who you can bounce this stuff off, or if you want to look at possible workshop models that are available. I mean, the most beautiful thing that I've seen is Jake Knapp's sprint model.
Yeah, exactly.
It's absolutely brilliant. But you know, in general, they use it for UX, but I've tried to use it for brand and works beautifully. You could try that. That's an excellent model to do that.
Just super short, 1 week.
Super short, 5 days. And at the end of it, you will have something that's a germ of what you want to start the religion with.
Awesome.
You know, so I think now, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Cheers.